Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Undefined. I have a very exciting guest with me. I have Mover Scott. You might have recognized him if you watched a lot of Disney Channel in the mid 2000s. He's from the Imagination Movers. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing well. I brought my friend Eddie the Monster here
Yes.
with, so he's got my back. But I'm excited to speak with you today and talk about Imagination Movers.
Yeah, so a little background for those who might not be familiar. Some of you might just think, oh, it was a Disney show. It's much more than that. And the research, so you guys started 20 years ago in 2003, and you guys are still going now. And part of the reason why I have Scott on today is that they actually started doing 18 plus shows. You have
Yes,
two coming up. You have one in New Orleans, and then you have one in Lafayette, right?
that's correct. Yeah, and then I mean, what Oxford, Mississippi is what 5 hours from New Orleans, so you never
Yeah,
know. But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, I think part of it was there were two things. Obviously, we played Lollapalooza this year, and because of that show, there were 400 kids that were basically 18 to 22 that made up our audience. And we were like, obviously, we were so humbled by the amazing positive energy that was there in this kind of collective, fun, musical, interactive show that we have. And it really kind of made us think about who our core demo was really when you had talked about like when we started, or actually when we were doing our Disney show. And, we made the cover of Polestar magazine, which is like a trade publication for the touring industry. And we made that in 2009. And our core audience then was probably 4 to 8. And so you smash cut to today and they're like 20, 18 to 22. And so we thought we'd try our hand at our first 18 and over show and see how it went.
Are you excited?
I'm super excited. I think all the guys are excited. Like you said, we've been doing this for 20 plus years. And, the great thing about us and really our whole journey is that, we were friends well before we became the movers. I went to high school with Smitty. We've been knowing each other forever. And there's really this crazy kind of like threading overlap with all the movers and our wives being friends and all of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And we actually lived in the same neighborhood in New Orleans, and really that was sort of helpful in our genesis, is because we lived in such close proximity. But having said that, we had been friends for a long time. We started for the right reasons. We really kind of grew grassroots before Disney joined,
Mhm.
before we partnered with Disney. And then, of course, Disney took it to a next level, and then even post Disney, I mean, you think we stopped making content with them in 2012, and now it's
Mhm.
2024, and we're still going strong. And I think part of it is because we do it for the right reasons. We're still really good friends, and we
Mhm.
enjoy what we do. And so with the 18 and over show, it's like when you find something that really kind of like, I mean, we enjoy every show that we get to do, but it's this newness of the 18 and over show that we're sort of excited about. It sort of like lights a little fire, an additional fire, um, that motivates you to just put on an amazing show for fans of any age, quite honestly.
Yeah, and what I wanted to kind of know about the Lollapalooza, because I saw a lot of it on my social media and
Yeah.
TikTok when it was happening, is that actually it wasn't like you guys weren't on the main stage where like all the adults could go see. It was on a kids stage, but the fact that still like all of those young, people my age all came, just shows kind of a testament to all the fond memories and that you guys are actually like it is like it's kids music, but it sounds just like adult music. It's just kind
Yeah, I
of it's
mean,
what that's what I like about you guys is that you take all your influences and you make a fun like alternative indie sounding song about like cleaning up your room or whatever.
yeah, I think, from day one, when we wrote music that we wanted to listen to, but obviously the age, the lyrics were age and developmentally appropriate, and really sort of kind of um paralleled our own kids. So we were sort of kind of looking at the world through the eyes of our children, and sort of the benchmarks that they were, going through developmentally, like riding a bike or something like that. And
Mhm.
it's funny because if you look at the first three albums, which are Good Ideas, Calling All Movers, and 8 Feet, and those are the first three indie albums that we made, all of the subject matter sort of parallels where your kids are. And so like Good Ideas is really kind of like sleeping through the night. And then with each album, it gradually, some of the milestones are a little bit you know, they're more along the timeline of a kid growing up, basically. Instead of three, it's six and then eight. And so, riding a bike is a little bit more developmentally appropriate for like a 7-year-old or 6-year-old. And so
Mhm.
that would be on 8 feet. And so a lot of our content paralleled where our kids were. But like you said, we wanted to create music that definitely was influenced by what we were listening to, and then also just music that made you in you know that made us happy as creators, but that resonated, I think, on multiple levels, with a nice low rhythmic section for kids, where that rhythm that they could get into, but then also a nice melody and some different instrumentation that sort of parents could appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of want to talk more about the creation of the book because I find it really interesting. So you said you guys are neighbors in Louisiana, and I read online. So you all kind of had kids at the same time. You were a teacher, Rich was a journalist, Smitty was a firefighter, am I correct? And then
Correct.
Dave was an architect.
You got it. We were
So
the
yeah,
people of your neighborhood.
and then, so what kind of made to the point like you all had different jobs? Was music like a lifelong hobby of you guys? And then when you guys all had kids, was that something like, okay, we want to do that, or was playing music or starting in a band, was that always something that like, oh, like on the back burner, that sounds like a great idea, but we have these other jobs?
Well, it's funny because, having been in the sort of the children's entertainment world for 20 plus years, you have a lot of people who will come into it who were actually, in bands like band like Lisa Loeb. She was a successful independent artist in pop, and then she did a children's album much, much later in her career. And so
Hmm.
you do have a lot of people who come in uh, and do music for children after they've done, really kind of what they're known for. We were sort of the reverse, even though we played in, like, I and Smitty played in bands growing up. Rich played in bands in New Orleans. It really wasn't until the movers that we actually decided to come together as a group, as a unit. And so, you know, I was the progenitor of the idea of the movers, because as a teacher, as you mentioned, I was seeing a lot of my students lack creativity. And if we were doing a writing assignment, they were regurgitating an episode of SpongeBob or something like that. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, I always kind of have maybe this romantic ideal of, a kid picking up a stick and that stick becoming anything but a stick. It could be a
Hmm.
baton. It could be a pretend flute. It was anything but, and it was really only limited by the child's imagination. So when a kid picks up a stick and it's only a stick, that's like where my heart just sort of like crumbles.
Hmm.
And so I'd shared with the guys about the idea of creating a show that really featured live action, because I think at that time all I was seeing was puppets and cartoons, and really nothing for like positive male role models. I thought was lacking as well. And so I had a friend at the local PBS affiliate, and of course, Mr. Rogers is like,
Yeah.
he was really kind of like, that's what you aspire to be, that kind of individual who looks at children and understands that they're complex beings, and doesn't treat them in a way that talks down to them, but lifts them up,
Hmm.
and sees them as empowered and complex individuals, even though they're growing, every day. And I think he was sort of the model, but we wanted to take that kind of aesthetic and meld it with like the Beastie Boys. And so when we came up with the idea for the show, which was the Imagination Movers, which were basically, and here between you and I, the original concept was sort of like we were the physical manifestation of the creative process for a child. So, like when a child had a problem, then we would go to work. And so the idea warehouse was really a metaphor for the brain. And that's why you have all
Hmm.
these rooms that you could go into. And so when the child has the problem or the idea emergency, we would go clock in, and we were sort of just the physical manifestation of that process. That was the original concept. Of course, it evolved. But but we just really wanted, at the beginning, wanted to create a local live action kids show that was music based. And when we got the idea, the music sort of wrote itself for those early ideas that we had, which was like, hey, do I want to eat a donut or a carrot? And then it's like, snacking ABCs and my favorite snacks. Those were some of the early songs we wrote.
Hmm. That's so awesome. And then you guys came up with the show, and then there's so many visual components to what you guys do as well. Like, where did the whole uniform, like the coveralls idea, all the different characters, was that something that I because I saw you guys, you've been doing you've been rocking the uniform since before the television show even happened, and then you were touring for a while and you made like in-house music videos too. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, like I said, we had talked to the local PBS affiliate, and when we pitched the idea, they were like, "Oh, this is an amazing idea." And you know, we had our educational dogma there. You know, we had every reason
Hmm.
to for them not to say no. You know, we gave
Hmm.
them every reason not to say no. And they were like, "We love this, but we don't have any money." And we were like, "Well, look, if we create content, would you put it on?" And so that's really kind of what led to those music videos. But really, the coveralls, the visuals, you know, the wobble goggles, all those are really kind of
Hmm.
educationally based in the idea that there are multiple ways, multiple intelligences, ways that we learn. You know, you could be a visual learner, which was really what Mover Scott represented with the wobble goggles, that you could see problems from different POVs. And then, like, you know, you had Smitty, who was sort of the naturalist. You had, uh, you know, Rich, who was, you know, the more literary, the writer,
Hmm.
and then the analytical thinker, which was Dave, sort of the inventor.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, we had all of these visuals, and I think probably what was influential in that is, you know, we were fans of Devo. We were fans of Beastie Boys, and a lot of times Beastie Boys would wear these kind of red or orange coveralls,
Hmm.
but they would like be very uniform. And so early on, the idea of the imagination movers, which is sort of like the body and the brain, those two, that's sort of what the name kind of meant, the music for the body and brain, the imagination movers. Um, we like that sort of consistent visual look of being movers. And so, and it is funny because on the TV show, you know, we always got confused for, you know, like people asking us to move furniture. And that happened to us and still happens today. We get emails asking for us to move stuff.
Yellow, imagination movers. Have you got a situation that needs imagination? Furniture? No, we're not furniture movers. We're imagination movers.
I
Who
love it.
knows?
And then another, like, speaking of the TV show, one of my favorite things about it, especially as a kid, is it was one of the most like visually stimulating TV shows. I think not only because like the outfits and the singing and the music and everything, but the set was absolutely incredible, and it was just something straight out of a child's brain. I mean, you had all the brooms, and it didn't even like it didn't even look like green screen. Like there was a lot of like actual like set building. The warehouse was a real warehouse. I wanted to know. And then the coolest thing I found out is that it wasn't even like filmed in like California or New York. You did it all in New
No,
Orleans. So
that's
how was it
right.
like kind of putting all of that, what we just talked about, all these ideas, just visualizing it in the set? How did that come about?
Well, you know, I feel like, you know, we are so fortunate because I think probably what you saw on the TV show, 80% of that is really kind of what that original idea was that we had, that
Mm-hmm.
vision. So it was just a matter of us partnering with Disney and really them buying into that vision because it's really easy, especially when you're dealing with an entity like Disney, that they sort of take control and then they go off. And I think to their credit, they really didn't do that. They allowed our original vision to be what it was. And I think, you know, the primary colors, you know, the great thing about the show is, like you said, there wasn't a lot of CGI. I mean, obviously with the wobble goggles or Rich's scribble
Mm-hmm.
sticks, you had that, but a lot of the special effects were real. You know, they were like what's the term? It's like a traditional special effect that they would do, like when we were riding the bike in the episode that the late Willie Garson was in. You know, they're
Mm-hmm.
pulling us on bicycles, and so it makes that visual that we are actually riding. But it's such an old school, like, tip of the hat to
Mm-hmm.
kind of like silent movies
Yeah.
special effects. And so there was a wonderful crew in New Orleans. You know, like you said, we were able and so fortunate to be able to film in New Orleans, and this was really post Katrina, so it was really a significant part of the rebuild for New Orleans that our show was filmed there. And to Disney's credit, they allowed it to be filmed there. You know, they could have easily said, well, "Hey, you got to come to LA or you got to go here," but they bought into the idea. Unfortunately, we were able to do it in our backyard, so it was kind of crazy. It was surreal, quite honestly.
That is so awesome. And then I can't talk about the Imagination Movers without talking about like Knit Knots, Warehouse Mouse. Was that all kind of ideas that were floating around before the show, or is that something that once you got that outlet, we wanted to add these extra characters?
So we always had the idea for Knit Knots, and we
Mm-hmm.
had the idea of him sort of being the antithesis of the movers, but not in an antagonistic way. He was our foil, but never did we make fun of him. We were always respectful of him, even though he loved boring beige. Um, and so he was there. He was always with us. And unfortunately, he was with us for season one. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, at the end of season one, he did not test well. But I mean, in
No.
hindsight, in hindsight, he was the perfect foil for us. He was the perfect foil for us. And yet he didn't test as well as I think probably people wanted him to. And so he sort of disappeared. And of course, you know, so he left, and obviously we were sort of super disappointed. Now we did try to bring him back for different things. He was in the concert episode and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I lament the fact that he was only with us for a third of the journey. But yeah, he was with us from the original. Warehouse Mouse was always part of it. It's funny because in the pilot, which I think you can watch on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
they actually did not have Warehouse Mouse. They used a real mouse instead of originally, and you could probably see in Stir It Up, which is one of our first independent
Yes.
DVDs.
I
There's
just
Warehouse
watched
Mouse,
that
but he's more like a
information.
rat. So that version of Warehouse Mouse was more like a rat. But Dave made him. um, and so Dave made everything. I mean, he was really the very similar to his character. He made everything. Like he made all the puppets. He made all that kind of stuff. He made our toilet paper blowers that we use live. But so we had Warehouse Mouse. We had Knit Knots. We actually had Nina, but we named her Carla. That was the name that we had in our
Mhm.
original pitch. That changed from Carla in the pilot to Nina.
Mhm.
And they was really trying to find who Nina was. I think Disney really picked a great one with Wendy Callio. But before that, in the pilot, it was Jenna Ushkowitz who went on to Glee
Yeah.
afterwards. And so kind of a crazy, story. But
Mhm.
but
That's an
yeah,
awesome
so
fun
that
fact.
original idea, we had a lot of what you see. And so I think like I said, to Disney's credit, they allowed it to run. With the exception of things like, Knit Knots hitting the road after season one. So, but
I think Nit Knots is a bit of a trendsetter because now on like social media and like TikTok, you see all these like moms using all like the rooms full of
yes,
beige or the sad beige babies. I'm like, he was a trendsetter. He was doing the sad beige before everybody on the internet decided
he
to
was a
take after.
futurist. You're right. His whole vibe was a futurist vibe, and so we're only now, getting an idea of just how influential the character of Knit Knots would be, and so kudos to our buddy there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I want to talk to you. So you guys are also a heavily touring band. Do you have any cool memories from just being on the road for all those years? You're still on the road now. You have a handful of dates coming up for this year. Do you have any special stories you want to share?
I think touring is like when we were doing the show. So doing an episode would be, we worked 4 days. It took 4 days to do one episode, and we were
Mhm.
working 12 to 14-hour days to make that one episode. So we would do like, 25, 26 episodes a season. Then after that, we would go on the road and tour. So back in that at that time period, we were just for 3 years probably nonstop.
Mhm.
Um, and those big tours, which were really between season one and two and two and three, we were playing at 60 to 70 cities, and it was a grind. So, I mean, everybody has like this kind of, romantic ideal of touring of like, oh man, you get to go to this city and this city. But a lot of time the reality is like you're in the bus, then you're at a venue, then you're in a hotel, bus, venue, hotel, bus, venue, and seldom do you have days off where you actually can go visit a city. But all that being said, I think some of the wonderful memories I have from touring and playing live are always obvious. You get to, there's a part of our lyrics where we get our energy from the crowd, and that's true. It's like we are so out into the audience. We love to break that line between
Mhm.
performer and audience. that they become part of the experience, and the energy is just palpable. And so, there's nothing better than, and even if it means like Dave hitting an off note, because he's giving a kid a high five, that kid's going to remember that high five for a long, long time, rather than that off note he might hit. But so it's those moments and those exchanges that you have with fans who love the music and dig what you're doing that will always be part of me. And then also it's just really kind of like the simple times, like we finish a show and we're on the bus going to the next city, and it's really the camaraderie and brotherhood of us. And a lot of times on the bus, we would take turns being a DJ, and each guy would play 3 songs, and we might have a beer or here or there, but we'd be listening and just talking and enjoying one another's company. And that community and those little special moments were always something that are still part of what I love about what we get to do.
Oh, I love that so much. And speaking of music, that was actually another question I wanted to ask. And so I've kind of 2 questions relating to that.
Sure.
What kind of music, like when you were coming up with the idea, like where were your inspirations, like specifically, because you were all parents, what music, like regular music, did you play for your kids when they were growing up to kind of get them into music? And then the other side of the question, is there anything that your kids have gotten you into now? Because they're a bit older. I think they're around my age, and I wanted to know kind of your music from like a dad's point of view.
Sure. So, I mean, we came up in the 80s, we were 80s kids, and so new wave was a huge part of our upbringing. Smitty and I went to a predominantly Black high school in New Orleans, and so we were definitely part of an environment where, like, De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest were really, really kind of coming to fruition. And so we were totally digging, like, Me, Myself, and I, and a lot of the early hip hop, in that sort of native tongue school. But you couple that with new wave, and you couple that with like the Police and Rush and stuff like that. And that's sort of the kind of music we listen to. And really the music that I played for my kids were totally 80s. I mean, I'm sure they get sick of Depeche Mode or, Duran Duran or something like that. But so that we gave them a full dose of that. And I mean, I've always been personally a big indie guy. So I love indie music. And really kind of sort of the range of music, I really under that umbrella. It's such a big umbrella, but I was a huge fan of, and still a huge fan of, Sufjan Stevens. So I got my kids into Sufjan Stevens. And there's different indie bands that I love. I mean, I love the Wombats. My son hates the Wombats, but I love the Wombats. I love Liverpool bands. Circa Waves is a real band that I love to listen to now. So I mean, there are certain bands, like my son loves Alex G, certain artists like that I get a little in tune with from his vibe that he shares. And then my daughter is really kind of like 1975, and
I've seen them.
but she also loves, like, she loves 5 Seconds of Summer. She loves One Direction. And part of the reason why we did 5 Seconds of Summer's Youngblood was because my daughter was a huge 5 Seconds of Summer fan. And so when we learned that song, and, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, I know 5 Seconds of Summer opened up for One Direction on a tour, and I think I brought my kids to that One Direction tour. But I was not schooled or versed in them. And then of course my daughter educated me, and I was like, yeah, well, I think we could do Youngblood. And it's certainly kind of an anomaly, because I think it's over 1 billion streams on Spotify alone. And so we played that when we played Lollapalooza, and we were like shocked at just how, the Five Sauce fans were just so we're jonesing on it. And so and I think part of the 18 and over show, and what people can expect and enjoy from it, is like, it's a combination of the Movers classics. I mean, we're not doing much different than we would normally play. I mean, we're going to have our Toilet Paper, Vortex Cannons, all that kind of stuff, classic songs that you kind of grew up with and know from the show. And then we're going to have some strategic covers like Youngblood and a One Direction song, things like that.
Oh my gosh, I would love to hear you guys sing One Direction.
It'll be fun. I'm so stoked.
Yeah, that is so awesome. I love that. I saw the Five Sauce stuff too. I was like, I have to ask about that, because I
definitely
kept seeing the videos on social media. Makes me so happy. That is awesome. And then, like, speaking of, were those kind of the same bands? Like the new wave, was that all same? Like when you guys write, like the stylistic wise, because you guys go through so many different styles. Is that just, all through that kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, so I think, like for example, we're going to release an album 2024 called Blue Skies. And I think that album definitely, occasionally we'll go to concerts as a group. I mean, it's so funny. Like you would think like we would get sick of each other, and we don't. And like, we went and saw Wet Leg
Oh my
play
gosh.
in New Orleans. And so, there's definitely some kind of like influential wet leggish kind of moments on the new album. And really it's that I think what we kind of like looked at and were impressed by were these like 2.5 minutes to 2 minute songs that were like really great pop gems, like indie pop gems, which I think Wet Leg sort of accomplished on their last album, their first album. And so there's definitely some of that. But I think for us, when we look at albums, and especially this one, there's definitely a mix between kind of earnest songs and silly songs, and then sort of anthemic songs. But we definitely have we try to like, obviously write where the muse kind of pushes us to, but it's always with like I said, like there's an earnest song called Big Feelings on the new album, and then there's a silly song called Banana Phone. That's not the Raffi song, but our own our own take on it.
Uh-huh.
And so there's really kind of silliness as well as serious songs. And then always just at the end, an acknowledgement and an awareness and an appreciation of kids and families, because it really is a shared experience. So you want to have music that's not only for kids, but also for their parents, because they have to listen to it. And poor parents who have to listen to Watermelon Meow Meow all the
Yeah,
time. It's like one of those
I was
things,
gonna bring that up too. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that one too, because I feel like that song, Wonder Me, if those are not aware, it is a new song that the movie's come out with, what, a year or two ago? It's pretty recent.
Yeah, the original came out in 2012, and then we re-released it like a year or so ago, and it sort of kind of blew up virally. And it's
Yeah.
sort of weird. It's like one of those kind of, we have certain really silly songs. I should put this into the really silly song category, like Mayor of Fishtown,
Yeah.
and then of course Watermelon Meow Meow, which was sort of like I was in a studio and Smitty kind of joined me, and sort of we were the sort of the pushers of the buttons for that particular song to even get on the ground. And probably to Rich's bane, it's the most popular song in our canon.
That is so
Because
wild.
it's sort of like not a song, but it's a song. But if anything that introduces people in a way that's friendly and affirming to our catalog of music, if it's through Watermelon Meow Meow, then so be it. I'm so happy actually that people dig it, and that it invites them into our other songs, and they get to listen to what we get to do. Because I think the only, I guess, little lament that I have is like, we came on Disney in a weird time, because we were originally on the channel, and then they started Disney Junior. So then we were off the channel, then we were on a network. And so all of our journey with them in that period of time was sort of kind of like, um, definitely had obstacles that we had to overcome. So it wasn't like we were on the channel for 3 years. We were on the channel, off the channel, on a new network. Then you went to Disney Junior to see us, and it was like this weird kind of hiccupy kind of experience. But I think part of that is like, I can probably speak for the band in this sense that music's always been the foundation for what we've done. And even the show idea was a music-based show from the get-go. And I feel like we have like a great canon. We have great songs. And sometimes I was like, I just wish people more got into the music of what we do, because we're always associated with the visuals of the show, which is great. And I'm like pulling hairs right now, but it's like there are certain songs that I'm just like, oh man, this is such a great song. And and you look at consumption of like, oh, it's got 40,000 streams, which is great, but it's like this, I wish people listen to this song. It's so good, that kind of thing. So I mean, that's just an artist. You create something, you're like, this
Oh,
is
for
so good,
sure.
go listen to it. But
Yeah, even
it
like
is.
revisiting, like I found Stir It Up on YouTube, and I was like, all these songs are so good. And and I think it's almost like what are my amount, like you said, it's a good gateway because it's like I feel like it's the antithesis of like a silly song that like I listened to those kinds of songs as a kid. It just like you listen to it, crack up, and then Spotify or the algorithm will just push another song. I'm like, oh wow, the parents might enjoy those.
That's right. Yeah, because it is. It's like one of those things. It's like, okay, do we create something to make parents hate us, or But I think at the end of the day, I think we look at our canon, and maybe there's like 3 or 4 songs that the entire band will kind of roll their eyes at that we put out there. But for the most part, I think 95, 98% of our canon we are so proud of. I mean, and not to say we're not proud of the other 3 or 4 songs, but like for example, Breakfast Time Holler, which was on the show. Breakfast time, make me wanna holler. Was a song that I don't think we got to finish, so it's not a finished song. So that's sort of our biggest beef with that song. It's not really finished. And part of it was because for season 2 and season 3, really the end of season 2 and really most of season 3, we came into the project with 3 albums worth of content.
Mm-hmm.
And so season 1 is a lot of those songs used in the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But then we were writing songs for episodes, which is really hard because you would be filming, and when you weren't filming, you'd be in the studio working on a song. And a lot of times it was, we had a great producer, Jason Ryan, who was like recording Smitty's guitar part, and then Dave would come in and do the bass, and he would record the bass line, and he would help put it all together. But it was all really kind of like puzzle pieces that he had to put in depending on when we weren't shooting. So, but it's like, with that being said, we were writing songs like Robot Chase Song, which I love. It's such a punk song. It's a robot chase song. We thought it wouldn't take long, but now he's gone, baby, gone. For kids. And that would never have been done had we probably not been writing to a narrative. So it sort of kind of gave us the impetus to kind of like, oh, we can be creative in this direction. And we also like you mentioned, I think earlier, like we would bring in genres and play around with genres, whether it be ska or even like, sort of like kind of like the Good Guys, which is sort of like that Western kind of like storytelling song, So we get to play around with some genres and things like that too.
I think, that's so cool. It would be so much you can do under the umbrella of like kids and family music too, because you're exposing a lot of kids to music for the first time. So you're able to just, I feel like you guys do such a good job of breaking the mold of like the normal kind of sing-songy, and you don't talk down, you just talk to. And I think that is such an amazing thing that you guys accomplished. I mean, when your show came out, I'm 23, so I was like 8. I was in like third or fourth. I still watched it every day. I had a younger brother, but I was like, it was such an endearing show, and the music was so good that it really didn't matter where you fell on the age bracket. Like, yeah, if you were a little too old for like typical Playhouse Disney, it was still, engaging in the music too. It is still something that it really doesn't have that like nursery rhyme-y tendency to it that a lot of
I think you're spot on. I think even today, it's like, you can watch it on Disney Plus, and I think the episodes hold up so well. And it's such it's sort of an anomaly nowadays where it's like there is no live action kids shows for the most part. And we were just fortunate that we had a vision. We're able to be encouraged and supported with that vision, create amazing music along the way, and continue to do so. I mean, quite honestly, I think the fact that we are still relevant, 10 years after our last episode aired on, on the Disney Junior, that we're still around and making music, is part of like just the brotherhood that I have with the other guys in the group, and how much we enjoy one another's company, but also that there are parents, as well as young adults like yourself, who still enjoy the music and the vibe. And as long as there are people like you, Bella, and your listeners and kids of all ages, we're going to continue doing what we get to do. So we feel blessed being able to do it, quite honestly.
That's awesome. I love it so much. Wrapping things up, but are you still a teacher? I heard that you were a college professor.
So I am a college professor. This is my office. I'll give you a little. So there's Eddie the Monster. I have a little poster on the wall. Is
that a Gaslight Anthem poster?
You got it, Gaslight Anthem poster. And then on this wall, I have a lot of the paintings from the show. There's Rocky there.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
Burrow Blue, our Blue Burrow. And so, yeah, I'm a professor, an assistant professor at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. I get to teach wonderful college students. And I am the coordinator of the music business program. So I think
Wow.
part of my experience with Disney and being in the music industry led me to this road. And I went from it's funny because, we all kind of went for full circle because
My God.
we were, I was a teacher. Like you said, Smitty was a firefighter, Dave, an architect, Rich, a journalist, and we're all doing the same things we started, but in different places. Like I'm now a professor, and Smitty's a chief in the fire department, and Dave's an
Wow.
architect for the state, and Rich is doing editorial work with with a communications firm in New Orleans. But we still go out
Wow.
movers
I go
and
into I'm going into communications too, so that's cool to hear that Rich
yeah.
is doing that.
So
Do you get
go on.
recognized by your students? Like when they go into
Oh
the
yes,
office?
totally, totally. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because especially now, like right now, this age is grew up with the show. They definitely know who the Imagination Movers are, and even if you don't, you know the guys in the blue suits or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so it is kind of fun to be able to teach students that were fans when they were 6, 7, and 8. It's kind of cool.
That must be such a full circle moment too.
It
Like
is. It is.
to like see the people that you were entertaining all those years ago, being able to have the connection with them as a professor. That is so awesome.
It is. It is. It really is.
Well, it was so great talking to you. Very exciting stuff. Got a new album, got a couple 18 plus shows, hopefully more. Maybe I would love if you guys make it down to Mississippi. That would be so
Definitely.
good. Yeah, it's just was such like it's like a childhood dream country. It was so awesome talking to you.